The courtroom was thick with tension, an almost tangible pressure that weighed down on everyone present. Rows of wooden benches, polished to a dull shine, creaked under the restless shifting of reporters, spectators, and family members. Cameras clicked and whirred, reporters scribbled furiously into their notepads, and a low murmur of voices rippled through the room. The case had captivated the city for weeks. A violent robbery gone wrong, a missing piece of critical evidence, and an accused man whose every movement seemed to tighten the suspense. Today was pivotal, the climax of a trial that had left the public anxious and the courtroom buzzing with expectation. Amid the clatter of legal proceedings, a small figure drew no immediate notice. A 3-year-old girl perched on her mother's lap. Her mother, anxious and protective, kept a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder, guiding her to sit still on the hard bench. But the child was restless, shifting slightly, curious, her wide, innocent eyes observing everything with the sharp focus of someone far older than her years. The buzzing chatter of adults seemed distant to her. Instead, her gaze found a different focal point. The police dog seated calmly near its handler. The K9 was a striking German shepherd, muscles taut under its sleek coat, ears alert, eyes scanning the room with quiet intelligence. Even as the officers prepared for the trial, the dog remained calm, obedient, an emblem of training and discipline. Yet to the child, the dog seemed alive with a secret, something she instinctively understood but could not articulate. She leaned slightly forward, her small hands clutching her mother's sleeve, and stared at the animal as if it held the answers to questions no adult could ask aloud. Around them, the courtroom had assumed its usual structure. The judge, a middle-aged man with graying hair, sat elevated on his bench, gavel in hand, scanning the crowd with a mixture of authority and measured patience. The jury, tense and alert, leaned slightly forward, eyes flicking between the attorneys and the witnesses. Prosecutors shuffled papers, whispered to colleagues, and glanced at the evidence displayed on monitors set up beside the bench. Defense attorneys, equally focused, sat in a tense huddle, exchanging hushed strategies, their eyes flicking occasionally toward the K9, perhaps noting the officer's presence, but unaware of the attention the little girl was about to draw. The child's mother whispered softly, "Stay still, honey," but the girl's attention was elsewhere. Her tiny finger, innocent and unassuming, slowly extended, pointing directly at the police dog. A slight, almost imperceptible gasp rippled through the courtroom as reporters noticed the gesture. Heads turned, eyes followed the child's pointing finger. The officer smiled politely, unsure of whether to move the dog or intervene. He bent slightly, giving the girl a nod that seemed to say, "It's okay, I see you." The courtroom felt shift, subtle at first, like the change of wind before a storm. The judge paused mid-sentence, his gavel raised, squinting at the little girl. "Miss?" He started, unsure of how to address the situation. The attorneys stopped mid-argument, their words dying in the air as they all processed the unexpected distraction. Everyone, reporters, jurors, spectators, leaned in, curious. How could such a small, fragile child command the attention of an entire room so heavy with authority and tension? The child's eyes widened slightly, her focus unbroken. The K9, sensing the change in energy, tilted its head, ears twitching. Its gaze met hers, and for a fleeting moment, it was as if the two communicated without words. There was no barking, no growling, only a silent understanding, a connection that rippled through the air. The mother, initially tense, noticed the subtle smile tugging at her daughter's lips, a mix of curiosity and quiet delight. Something extraordinary was about to happen, though no one yet knew the significance. Outside the courtroom, The hum of the city seemed to fade. The reporters clicked cameras incessantly, some whispering to each other in disbelief. "Did you see that kid?" "She's pointing at the dog again," one murmured. "I think I don't know. Signaling something?" Another shook their head, unconvinced, but the murmur of curiosity spread like wildfire. Spectators shifted uncomfortably, some smiling at the unusual spectacle of a toddler capturing so much attention. Even seasoned journalists, accustomed to sensational moments, found themselves holding their breath. The trial itself had been intense. Witnesses had recounted harrowing stories, evidence had been meticulously examined, and lawyers had gone back and forth in a dance of logic, persuasion, and legal precision. But now, all of that seemed to pause. The small hand of a 3-year-old pointed toward a police dog, and the courtroom was suspended in a moment of unexpected anticipation. It was absurd, improbable, yet undeniably captivating. The little girl leaned closer to the canine. Her mother gently touched her shoulder, whispering, "Be careful." But the girl didn't respond. She was focused, her tiny body taut with attention. Her finger remained extended, trembling slightly, as if it carried the weight of knowledge far beyond her years. The officer's posture became alert. He noticed subtle changes in the dog's body language, ears flicking, tail shifting, a quiet hum of readiness. The child, without realizing it, had initiated a chain of attention that none of the adults had anticipated. Every eye in the courtroom seemed drawn to the pair, child and dog. Reporters leaned forward, pens poised. Jurors squirmed in their seats, intrigued. The judge adjusted his glasses, trying to comprehend what significance this could hold. Lawyers paused mid-sentence, exchanging uncertain glances. For a brief moment, the legal machinery seemed to quiet, replaced by something entirely human: curiosity, wonder, and a hint of awe. It was in this fragile, intense moment that the story of the little girl and the police dog truly began. Child's gesture, so small, so simple, was about to have consequences no one, neither the officers, the lawyers, nor the judge, could have anticipated. The courtroom had been tense, already fraught with emotion, but now it held a suspended breath, waiting for the impossible, the extraordinary, to unfold. And as she stared at the canine, something seemed to flicker in her gaze, an understanding, a recognition that went beyond play, beyond innocence. It was as if she knew something vital, a truth that adults had missed. The officer noticed the dog's subtle alertness, the kind trained for critical discovery, and a quiet thrill ran down his spine. The tiny girl, perched on her mother's lap, had unknowingly set the stage for a moment that would ripple through the trial, through the city, and through every heart present in that room. The judge cleared his throat, but no words could break the spell. The gallery was silent, the only sound the faint scratching of pens on paper, the quiet shuffle of shoes, and the low hum of anticipation. All eyes were fixed on the child and the dog. No one could yet predict what would happen next, but a profound sense of expectancy hung in the air. Something remarkable was about to occur, and everyone in the room felt it. The child's hand remained raised. The dog's gaze never wavered. And in that suspended moment, the courtroom, a place governed by law, procedure, and evidence, was transformed into a stage for something extraordinary, a prelude to a revelation no one had expected. It was a pause in time, a calm before a storm that would change the course of the trial forever. The courtroom's tension, already thick, intensified as the little girl's gaze remained locked on the police dog. Her tiny hand still pointed unwaveringly, her finger quivering with the subtle weight of unspoken understanding. The mother's soft murmurs of caution went unnoticed. The child was mesmerized, her attention entirely on the canine. The dog, trained for months in precision and instinct, responded subtly. Its ears twitched, tail shifting lightly, as if acknowledging the presence of someone or something that mattered. The connection was intangible, yet undeniable, and those paying close attention felt it. The officers nearby exchanged glances, uneasy yet intrigued. This was no ordinary courtroom distraction. There was a strange intelligence emanating from the child's gaze, an uncanny ability to notice details adults had overlooked. The handler bent slightly toward the dog, whispering low commands, testing its alertness. The canine stiffened, nose twitching, and eyes following the child's every movement. A soft hum of attention passed between the two, a silent dialogue that seemed almost preternatural. In a room filled with seasoned professionals, the instinctive understanding between child and canine became the focal point. The reporters, sensing something unusual, leaned in closer. One whispered to a colleague, "Do you see it?" The dog's reacting to her. Another adjusted their camera, capturing every fleeting moment, the child's hand trembling, this dog's subtle movements, the hushed reactions of those seated nearby. The gallery, initially curious, now grew restless with anticipation. Spectators whispered to each other, straining to understand the meaning behind this silent exchange. Could a toddler really influence a highly trained canine? The notion seemed impossible, yet the evidence before them was undeniable. The judge, noticing the unusual scene, paused, pushing up his glasses. He cleared his throat softly, trying to regain control of the proceedings. "Ms.," he began, looking at the mother, "is your child all right?" The mother nodded, offering a reassuring smile. "She's fine, Your Honor. She's just curious." The judge hesitated, but allowed the moment to pass. Adults tried to refocus on the trial, but the atmosphere had shifted. The child's simple gesture, so small and innocent, had captured more attention than any witness, any evidence, or any argument presented so far. As the trial resumed, the girl's tiny voice broke through the murmurs. "Doggy," she said softly, almost as if speaking to herself. The room fell silent. The officer's eyebrows rose. The dog's ears perked further. The word, simple and unassuming, carried an unexpected weight. It was as though the child had given the dog permission to act, to notice, to reveal something critical. Lawyers paused mid-sentence, perplexed, unsure whether to proceed or to observe. The jury, initially bemused, leaned forward in fascination, sensing that the interaction might carry significance. The child's mother whispered again, urging her to stay still, but the girl barely reacted. Her focus was complete. The canine, reacting instinctively, stepped slightly closer to the child's hand, nose lowering to the ground. The subtle movements, almost imperceptible to most adults, conveyed a story of recognition and awareness. The child's pointing finger guided the dog's attention, and observers could see the tension ripple through the handler, who remained calm, yet visibly alert. Something extraordinary was unfolding, and even the seasoned professionals were not fully prepared. Around the courtroom, whispers escalated into murmurs of disbelief. "What is she doing?" A juror whispered to another. "Is this part of some training?" another asked. Reporters scribbled furiously, their pens racing, against the unfolding moment. Every subtle twitch, every glance, every slight shift in posture was being analyzed. For many, it was difficult to separate the innocence of a 3-year-old from the sheer gravity of the situation. Yet the child's actions carried an undeniable authority, a quiet yet commanding influence over a situation that had stumped adults. For weeks, the officers, recognizing the potential significance, allowed the dog to follow the child's cues. Each subtle gesture, an extended finger, a small tilt of the head, a soft murmur, elicited a precise response. The canine's trained instincts kicked in, sniffing the air, analyzing the room, and reacting to cues that only the child seemed to understand. The courtroom leaned forward, drawn into the unfolding scene like spectators of a delicate, high-stakes performance. It was an extraordinary display, a convergence of innocence, intelligence, and instinct, all centered on a tiny figure who had yet to fully comprehend her influence. The judge, now fully attentive, allowed a brief pause in the proceedings. Let's take a moment," he said carefully, observing the child and the dog. Lawyers exchanged hurried glances, trying to process the implications. Evidence previously overlooked now felt within reach. A discarded piece of paper, a faint scent on the floor, a subtle movement of the dog, all seemed to converge around the child's focused attention. Every observer in the courtroom felt it. Something critical was about to surface, sparked by an innocence no one expected. Outside the courtroom, the city seemed oblivious to the tension inside, yet the story was already beginning to ripple. Through the media, reporters shared photos and live updates. A tiny girl pointing at a police dog during a high-profile trial. Social media began to buzz, with viewers intrigued by the unlikely scene. Yet inside the courtroom, the energy was different. It was not spectacle alone, it was suspense, curiosity, and the dawning realization that the child's actions might carry weight far beyond a mere distraction. The child's hand quivered slightly, but she did not remove it. Her gaze, intense and unwavering, seemed to pierce through the canine, almost as if she were silently communicating with it. The dog responded with precision, moving carefully toward the direction indicated. The handler adjusted his stance, whispering commands, ensuring the dog's responses remained controlled. Lawyers, reporters, and jurors alike could sense that. The room's rhythm had shifted. Something crucial was taking place, orchestrated not by legal expertise or adult experience, but by instinct, innocence, and perhaps an intuitive understanding that adults could neither replicate nor fully comprehend. The gallery watched in a hushed awe. Adults leaned forward, trying to decipher meaning from the silent exchange. The child remained calm, yet her body exuded anticipation. She had unknowingly become the center of the trial's attention, her actions quietly dictating the movements of a highly trained police dog. The courtroom, usually governed by rules, order, and decorum, had become a stage for something rare, extraordinary, and profoundly human, a collision of innocence and expertise that defied expectation. At that moment, the reporters, lawyers, and jurors all understood the unspoken. The child's gestures and focus were not arbitrary. They were purposeful, guided by an innate awareness that seemed to transcend age. The dog's responses reinforced this perception, subtle yet unmistakable, each movement signaling recognition, readiness, and alertness. The room felt suspended in time, a collective breath held in anticipation of what might come next. Something extraordinary was brewing, something that would change the trajectory of the trial. Even the child's mother, initially anxious, could sense the shift. Her daughter's fascination with the dog had transformed from a playful curiosity into something more profound, more impactful. She whispered softly, unsure if her words were necessary, and watched as the canine followed her child's guidance. The courtroom felt alive in a new way. Every person present caught between disbelief, curiosity, and awe. The smallest observer, a 3-year-old girl, had become the unexpected catalyst for a moment no one would forget. As the moment stretched, the judge cleared his throat again, carefully choosing his words. "Everyone, let's remain patient," he said, trying to restore order while acknowledging the significance of the unfolding scene. Lawyers nodded, reporters poised their cameras, and jurors leaned in with rapt attention. Every subtle interaction, child's finger pointing, the dog's responsive movements, the hushed whispers of the gallery, added to the mounting anticipation. It was clear to all. The next words, the next gesture, might carry weight far beyond what anyone could imagine. The child's focus intensified, her fingers steady, unwavering. The dog, sensing the importance, shifted slightly, its muscles taut, ready to respond to cues only the child could give. The tension in the courtroom was palpable, a mix of disbelief, awe, and the subtle thrill of witnessing something unprecedented. In that moment, the impossible felt possible, and the extraordinary seemed imminent. Every eye followed the pair. Every mind strained to comprehend, and every heart seemed to quicken with the anticipation of revelation. The atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted completely. What began as a typical day in a tense trial had transformed into an extraordinary tableau of innocence and instinct, where a 3-year-old child and a police dog seemed to share a silent understanding that defied logic. Observers held their breath, waiting for the inevitable moment when the child would speak, when the dog would respond, and when the courtroom, already captivated, would witness something that no one could have predicted. The courtroom had been suspended in a strange, expectant silence. Every adult, from the judge to the jurors to the bustling reporters, felt the weight of the moment. The child's tiny finger remained pointed at the police dog, unwavering and deliberate, as if she were signaling something of undeniable importance. The dog, trained for precision and instinct, responded subtly, shifting its posture, tail stiffening slightly, ears pricked. The handler bent closer, whispering commands softly, but the canine ignored them in favor of the cues from the child. Every subtle movement radiated significance, and the room's occupants could sense that the turning point was imminent. The mother, though tense and anxious, whispered softly, "Honey, be gentle," unsure of what her daughter understood or intended. The child did not respond. She was absorbed, her gaze unwavering, her focus absolute. She seemed to know something the adults could not yet grasp, a truth hidden beneath layers of procedure, law, and human assumption. The judge leaned forward, curiosity piqued, unsure whether to intervene. Lawyers, frozen mid-sentence, exchanged glances of bewilderment. The gallery's murmurs had stopped entirely. Everyone's attention had been magnetically drawn to the tiny girl and the remarkable canine beside her. And then, softly, clearly, unmistakably, she spoke. "He knows." The courtroom froze. The words, so simple, so unassuming, carried a gravity that none of the adults could have anticipated. The judge blinked, his gavel hovering mid-air. Lawyers paused mid-argument, some instinctively leaning forward, ears straining to hear better. Reporters scribbled furiously, struggling to capture the moment. The jury exchanged astonished glances. "He knows?" One whispered incredulously. "Did she just?" murmured another. The room, previously dominated by procedural order and tense argument, had shifted into a state of awe and disbelief. The officers exchanged nervous, uncertain glances. The canine's response was immediate. Its ears pricked, nose lowering slightly. To the ground, tail stiffened. The dog's body language indicated recognition, alertness, and readiness. It was as though the child's words had triggered an instinctive understanding, not just in the dog, but in the room itself. All those present felt it, the sudden weight of possibility, the thrill that something extraordinary was unfolding before their eyes. A 3-year-old child had just spoken 2 words that seemed to alter the course of events. The gallery of spectators leaned forward in unison, whispers spreading like wildfire. "Did you hear that? The kid just said, 'He knows.' Did she mean the dog?" Murmurs ran through reporters, attorneys, and jurors alike. The courtroom seemed to vibrate with tension, a quiet electricity in the air. Some viewers felt tears prick their eyes, moved by the innocent clarity of the child. Others struggled to comprehend the implication that a toddler could have observed and recognized something adults had missed entirely. The scene was both surreal and profoundly human. The judge cleared his throat, attempting to regain composure. "Miss," he began, glancing at the mother. The mother, equally uncertain, whispered, "She's fine, Your Honor. She just noticed something." The courtroom seemed suspended in disbelief. The child, oblivious to the monumental impact of her words, tilted her head slightly, as if inviting the dog to respond. The canine, sensing the cue, shifted its weight and stepped cautiously toward the direction the child indicated. Each movement, subtle yet precise, drew the attention of every eye in the room. The attorneys, now fully alert, realized the significance immediately. Evidence previously overlooked, minor details dismissed as inconsequential, could now hold new meaning. Objects, traces, and locations that had gone unnoticed for weeks were suddenly relevant. The child's words, "He knows," had transformed the focus of the trial. A dog trained for investigation, now reacting to cues from the toddler, could provide insight that human observation alone had failed to deliver. It was an extraordinary intersection of innocence, instinct, and law enforcement precision. Reporters scrambled to record every nuance. Cameras zoomed in on the child's hand, the dog's movements, and the subtle interplay between the two. Every twitch of muscle, every flick of the tail, every glance was documented. The room seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting for the next revelation. Observers whispered theories, some tentative, others incredulous. How could such a small voice influence such a critical, high-stakes trial? And yet, the proof was visible to all. The child had spoken, the dog had responded, and the courtroom felt the weight of a breakthrough waiting to happen. The little girl's demeanor remained calm. She had no understanding of the chaos she had unleashed, no awareness of the monumental significance of her words. She merely observed, her tiny hand still extended, her gaze fixed on the canine. The dog, in turn, reacted with a trained responsiveness that suggested comprehension and readiness. The handler, initially cautious, allowed the interaction to continue, recognizing that the child's cues were more effective than any command he could give. In that room, control had shifted in the most unexpected way from adults to a child, to a partnership of innocence and instinct. A hush settled over the spectators. Jurors, usually trained to process evidence dispassionately, felt an unusual stirring of wonder. The courtroom, typically rigid with procedure, seemed to exist in a liminal space where disbelief, awe, and anticipation coexisted. Every detail mattered. The child's pointed finger, the dog's precise movements, the mother's anxious whispers, the handler's subtle cues. The room had become a stage for an unfolding drama, one in which the simplest of words, "He knows," held the potential to shift understanding, focus, and perhaps even the verdict itself. The prosecution and defense attorneys exchanged hurried glances. Strategies that had been meticulously planned seemed suddenly vulnerable to disruption. The child's statement introduced an unpredictable variable into the proceedings. Yet, there was a sense that this was not chaos, but clarity. The words, though small, carried an intuitive authority. The dog's response reinforced the weight of the observation. It was a delicate dance of recognition and revelation that no legal expertise alone could have orchestrated. The gallery continued to murmur softly, drawn into the extraordinary tableau. Some spectators whispered to their neighbors about fate, about the uncanny timing of events. Others simply watched, hearts racing, knowing they were witnessing something remarkable. Reporters, meanwhile, tried to capture the scene in photographs and notes, sensing a story that would captivate the city and beyond. Social media would later explode with this moment, but within the courtroom, the immediacy, the suspense, and the quiet magic of the interaction were palpable. The child's mother, initially anxious and protective, now allowed a faint smile to cross her face. She understood, even if only instinctively, that her daughter's words and gestures were changing the tenor of the trial. The canine handler, too, observed with a mixture of awe and relief. The dog, trained for months in obedience and investigative response, had been prompted into action by cues only the child seemed capable of giving. Every subtle movement, every nuanced gesture, was an orchestrated revelation, invisible to most, yet impossible to ignore. The judge, regaining some composure, allowed the proceedings to continue cautiously. Witnesses were asked to clarify statements. Lawyers adapted their strategies. Yet even as the trial resumed, the courtroom's atmosphere had shifted irrevocably. The child had spoken, the dog had responded, and the implications rippled outward, influencing every observation, every interpretation, every decision made in that room. What had started as a typical tense day of legal procedure had been transformed into a moment of extraordinary possibility. It was then, in the quiet moments between statements and questions, that the enormity of the child's contribution began to settle on the courtroom. The words "he knows" were deceptively simple, yet they carried a clarity and insight that adults had overlooked. The dog's response, instinctive and precise, validated the observation. Even seasoned attorneys, detectives, and officers admitted, silently and to themselves, that something beyond explanation had occurred. A 3-year-old's innocent voice had illuminated a path that had eluded the most meticulous human efforts. Every eye in the room remained fixed on the child and the dog. The tiniest shift, a tilt of the head, a twitch of a finger, a movement of the paw was magnified in significance. Observers felt an almost sacred attention, aware that a moment of pure, uncalculated insight was unfolding before them. The courtroom, a place of rules and formalities, had been transformed into a theater of human instinct, innocence, and revelation. Every heartbeat, every glance, every breath was part of a shared experience unlike any other. And as the little girl, unaware of the weight of her words, maintained her gaze, the canine moved with cautious precision, sniffing, tilting, and responding as if guided by invisible knowledge. The judge, the jury, the lawyers, the spectators, all held their collective breath, waiting for the next movement, the next cue, the next revelation. In that moment, time itself seemed suspended, every second stretching with anticipation, until the true impact of "he knows" would fully unfold. The courtroom had reached a rare state of suspended disbelief. After the little girl's soft but impactful declaration, "he knows," every adult present felt the room shift in weight, as though reality had subtly altered. The judge's gavel hovered, uncertain if it could restore order to the spellbound spectators. Lawyers paused mid-argument, pens frozen above notebooks, voices caught in their throats. Even the jury, trained to focus on facts, could not suppress their wide-eyed fascination. Every gaze was drawn to the delicate scene unfolding between a toddler and a police dog, a connection invisible to all but unmistakably real. The child, perched on her mother's lap, pointed again. Her finger was steady now, deliberate, almost imperceptibly commanding. She tilted her head slightly, lips moving as if speaking softly to the dog, though no sound came from her voice. The canine responded immediately. Its ears pricked forward, tail stiffened slightly, and nose lowered to the floor. It stepped cautiously in the direction the child had indicated, each movement measured yet instinctive, as though guided by a hidden intelligence shared only between them. The handler's hands hovered near the dog's collar, ready to intervene, but he quickly realized intervention was unnecessary. The canine was already attuned. A hush fell over the courtroom. Spectators leaned forward in their seats, murmurs fading to silence as they absorbed the improbable scene. Reporters, usually driven by the urgency to record and broadcast, paused, captivated. Cameras clicked sporadically, careful not to disrupt the interaction, capturing the child's tiny hand, the dog's alert posture, and the subtle gestures that conveyed so much. Witnesses whispered to themselves. Jurors exchanged questioning glances, and even the judge seemed momentarily lost in observation, eyes narrowing with a mixture of curiosity and awe. The mother gently placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder, unsure if it was appropriate to intervene. "Honey, be gentle," she murmured, but the child barely acknowledged her. The girl's focus was unwavering, her gaze locked on the canine, and the connection between them seemed almost tangible. It was as if the child had awakened something. Within the dog, a latent awareness that transcended training, reason, or expectation. The courtroom, a place usually dominated by logic and procedure, had become a stage for intuition, instinct, and pure human and animal connection. The officer handling the dog subtly shifted his stance, observing every nuance. He had trained with the canine for years, yet even he had never witnessed such an instinctive, immediate response triggered by a child. The dog's movements were precise, deliberate, and calculated, reflecting months of training and a surprising recognition of cues only the child could give. Every sniff, every step, every tilt of the head was deliberate, guided by signals invisible to everyone but the two participants. The officer felt a ripple of awe. This was not merely obedience. It was a collaboration born of trust and instinct. Lawyers watched with bated breath, realizing the implications. Evidence long overlooked or dismissed as irrelevant could now be reconsidered. The child's words had acted as a catalyst, prompting the dog to demonstrate behaviors and reactions that could illuminate the path forward in the case. Prosecutors leaned in, eyes sharp, noting every detail. Defense attorneys adjusted their strategy, aware that this unforeseen variable could shift the courtroom's focus. Observers whispered softly. How could such clarity come from a 3-year-old? Yet the proof was undeniable. The dog's reaction was precise, measured, and immediate. The gallery of spectators was spellbound. Some held their breath. Others whispered with barely contained excitement. "Did you see that?" one murmured. "The dog. It's reacting to her." Cameras continued to click, capturing a moment that would later dominate news outlets and social media feeds. In the courtroom, the mundane structure of trial proceedings seemed irrelevant. The law, the evidence, the arguments all were momentarily eclipsed by the extraordinary connection between innocence and trained instinct. The child and the dog had become the center of attention, their bond dictating the room's energy and focus. The little girl clapped her hands softly, an expression of delight and curiosity crossing her face. She seemed unaware of the gravity of her actions or the attention she commanded. To her, this was play. To the dog, this was work guided by instinct. To the adults, it was a revelation. The canine's movements became more purposeful, each step highlighting potential clues. A discarded glove, a faint scent on the floor, a subtle indentation on the carpet. The child's gestures, paired with the dog's responses, began revealing details that had eluded investigators for weeks. The judge, now fully attentive, allowed the proceedings to pause briefly. "Let us take a moment," he said, voice calm but firm. "There appears to be a unique circumstance here." Lawyers nodded, some still incredulous, and the jury leaned forward, mesmerized. Even witnesses who had already given testimony were drawn into the unfolding event. Everyone recognized that this moment was extraordinary, a rare alignment of circumstance, intuition, and skill that transcended normal expectations. The child's observation was no longer mere curiosity. It had become central to the case. The officers, acknowledging the dog's responsiveness, allowed the demonstration to continue. The K9 sniffed along the indicated area, pawed lightly at the ground, and tilted its head toward points of interest. Subtle movements guided the handler and, indirectly, the courtroom. The gallery observed quietly, understanding that they were witnessing an event that defied conventional expectations of both law enforcement and childhood innocence. Even seasoned detectives exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the significance of what they were seeing. The dog's behavior suggested recognition, not randomness. It was responding to something tangible, something the child had intuitively indicated. Reporters captured every detail with rapid note-taking and high-resolution photography. They whispered to each other, some expressing disbelief. "I've never seen anything like this," one murmured. "A toddler influencing a police dog during a major trial. This will be a viral story." Social media would later amplify the event, but within the walls of the courthouse, the immediacy, suspense, and emotional gravity were palpable. Every subtle movement, every glance, every interaction between the child and the dog held meaning, and no one present could ignore it. The child's mother, though initially nervous, began to relax. Her daughter's attention to the dog was deliberate yet gentle, careful yet instinctive. She whispered softly, reassuringly, while allowing the child to lead the interaction. The handler, trained in months of obedience and investigative response, observed with awe. He realized that the dog was not simply performing trained behaviors. It was participating in extraordinary collaboration, guided by cues only a 3-year-old could provide. The interaction was mesmerizing, almost magical, in its precision and clarity. Lawyers adjusted their strategies, recognizing that this new dynamic could influence the direction of the trial. The child's observation and the dog's reaction provided fresh insight into evidence previously overlooked. The courtroom, already tense with anticipation, now hung on every motion of the toddler's finger and the dog's measured response. Jurors, often trained to disregard distractions, leaned in, unable to suppress fascination. Spectators whispered. Excitedly, reporters clicked cameras, and the judge observed quietly, aware that the courtroom had become witness to an event extraordinary in its subtlety and significance. The dog, guided by instinct and responsive to the child's cues, approached a corner of the courtroom where evidence had been partially overlooked, a small stain on the carpet, faint but present. Its tail stiffened, ears pricked, and paws shifted slightly, signaling recognition. The child's tiny finger guided the dog's attention, as if pointing out the significance. The gallery watched in silence, sensing that something pivotal had been revealed. The K9's reaction, precise and deliberate, reinforced the impact of the child's observation. What had begun as curiosity had evolved into insight with tangible implications. The judge, regaining composure, allowed the trial to continue cautiously. Witnesses were redirected, attorneys adjusted their focus, and investigators noted the dog's behavior carefully. The child, still perched quietly on her mother's lap, seemed unaware of the monumental impact she had just initiated. The K9's behavior, guided by instinct and an unlikely collaboration with a toddler, had uncovered details that could clarify the case. Every subtle movement was being documented, every reaction analyzed, and every observer felt the growing significance of the interaction. A low murmur ran through the courtroom. Spectators whispered about fate, intuition, and the miraculous alignment of circumstances. Reporters tried to convey the scene through cameras and words, but no photograph could capture the full depth of what was unfolding. A 3-year-old, a police dog, and the quiet, intuitive guidance that bridged innocence and trained instinct. Lawyers and investigators alike recognized the implications. This interaction could provide insights into the case that human observation alone might have missed. The courtroom had become a theater for revelation, guided by the unlikeliest of collaborators. The courtroom remained suspended in awe, each observer holding their breath as the little girl's tiny finger guided the canine with precision and focus. Every subtle gesture carried weight. Every minute movement of the dog revealed evidence previously overlooked. What had started as innocent curiosity was now unfolding into an investigative revelation, transforming the trial in ways no one could have imagined. The canine sniffed deliberately along the floor, pausing at seemingly insignificant points, tail stiff, ears pricked, while the toddler continued to point with unwavering concentration. Officers, initially cautious, now allowed the dog greater freedom to follow cues from the child. It padded toward a corner near the courtroom's entrance, pausing to sniff a discarded glove that had gone unnoticed until now. The child's small hand shifted slightly, directing the dog to investigate further. Every person present, lawyers, jurors, reporters, and spectators, was drawn into the unfolding moment, unable to divert their gaze. Evidence that had been dismissed or overlooked now demanded attention, illuminated by the unlikely partnership between innocence and trained instinct. His eyes wide, remained quiet, letting the natural progression unfold. He recognized the extraordinary nature of the moment, aware that any interruption could disrupt the delicate interplay between the child and the canine. Attorneys adjusted, papers rustling nervously as they observed the canine's movements. Some leaned forward, whispering to colleagues, their voices barely audible. "Did you see that? The dog found the glove where it was supposed to be," one whispered. "It's responding directly to her gestures. This is incredible." The little girl clapped her hands softly, delighted by the dog's attentive behavior. Her expression was one of innocent joy, entirely unaware of the monumental impact she was having on the proceedings. To her, this was a game, a playful interaction with a large, friendly animal. But to the courtroom, it was a revelation. The discarded glove, once deemed irrelevant, now became a focal point in the investigation, a clue that could link pieces of evidence together. Each subtle movement of the dog was an unspoken signal, guiding the attention of everyone present. Gallery leaned forward, whispers spreading like wildfire. Spectators exchanged glances, some incredulous, others awestruck. Cameras clicked, capturing the intricate dance between child and dog, recording every twitch of finger, every tilt of head, every subtle pawing movement. Reporters scribbled notes frantically, recognizing the historical significance of the moment. Social media would later erupt with fascination, but inside the courtroom, the immediacy, tension, and emotional weight were palpable. The audience sensed that this was more than a coincidence. It was a breakthrough, unfolding in real time. Detectives and officers whispered among themselves, sharing hurried observations. Some took photographs for official records, while others guided the canine to areas indicated by the child. Each subtle cue uncovered minor details: a faint scent on the floor, a scuff mark along the baseboard, a barely noticeable indentation in the carpet. These small discoveries, trivial to the untrained eye, suddenly held the potential to reshape the understanding of the crime. The child's actions, combined with the dog's training, had created a dynamic investigative tool that none of the adults had anticipated. The mother, observing silently, allowed a faint smile to cross her face. Her daughter's focus was unwavering, and though she was unaware of the trial's gravity, she had become the pivotal point in a high-stakes investigation. The handler, equally attentive, marveled at the precision with which the child guided the canine. Each gesture and response was a testament to intuition and instinct, a delicate coordination between human and animal, innocence and training, curiosity and insight. The courtroom felt like a living organism, collectively aware of the extraordinary event unfolding before it. Lawyers adjusted their strategies on the fly. Prosecutors whispered urgently, considering how the evidence uncovered by the canine could strengthen their case. Defense attorneys, their initial skepticism fading, reassessed their approach. The dog's precise reactions and the child's intuitive guidance were now central to the trial. Witnesses, called to review areas flagged by the child and the K9, provided clarifying details. Every new discovery, no matter how minor, carried the potential to shift the narrative. The courtroom buzzed with quiet anticipation, aware that each movement, each reaction, could have monumental consequences. The dog's attention shifted toward a small corner of the courtroom, where a faint trace of evidence had previously escaped detection. It pawed lightly at the floor, pausing, sniffing, then retreating briefly as if to reassess. The child's finger followed, guiding the K9 with delicate precision. "Over there," she whispered softly, her voice barely audible, yet carrying an unspoken command. The dog responded immediately, moving carefully to the indicated spot. Observers leaned forward, collectively holding their breath. Every subtle motion carried significance, and every pause intensified the tension. Reporters typed frantically, capturing every detail. "Toddler guides police dog to overlooked evidence," one noted, recognizing the story's viral potential. "Courtroom witness, 3-year-old influences major trial," typed another. Cameras zoomed on the child's tiny hands, the dog's alert posture, and the tense expressions of adults. Social media would later amplify the scene, but at that moment, the courtroom itself was the epicenter of a story that defied conventional understanding. The interplay of innocence, instinct, and procedural observation was creating a narrative that no one could ignore. Jurors whispered quietly among themselves, sharing astonished glances. They had been trained to focus solely on evidence and testimony. Yet here, a 3-year-old had inadvertently provided new leads that even seasoned detectives had overlooked. The courtroom, dominated by procedure and law, now felt like a stage for revelation. Each subtle cue from the child prompted a precise reaction from the K9, guiding attention toward overlooked details. Observers sensed the improbability of the situation, yet could not deny its authenticity. The little girl clapped her hands, her delight evident, as the K9 continued its careful examination. Each paw step and sniff seemed to validate her tiny gestures. She had no understanding of the trial's complexity, no awareness that she was unveiling critical leads, yet her intuition had become a tool of discovery. The courtroom was captivated, eyes following the subtle dance between innocence and trained instinct. Every observer, from the judge to the jury, felt the power of a moment that combined uncalculated insight with meticulous training. The discarded glove, faint scent trail, and subtle traces of movement began to form a coherent narrative. Each small clue, previously dismissed as insignificant, now linked to a broader understanding of the case. Lawyers whispered hurriedly, adjusting arguments, while officers took note, documenting the findings. Reporters captured the scene with urgency, recognizing a story that would inspire awe and fascination. The child's simple gestures, paired with the K9's instinctive responses, had uncovered an investigative path no adult had anticipated. The judge cleared his throat, allowing a brief pause. "Let us proceed carefully," he said, voice calm but deliberate. The gallery remained hushed, eyes locked on the child and the dog. Attorneys adjusted their approach, considering how the emerging evidence could influence testimonies and strategies. Witnesses were brought forward to examine areas highlighted by the K9, confirming details that had previously gone unnoticed. The courtroom, already tense with anticipation, now held a quiet reverence for the remarkable collaboration unfolding before them. The dog, attentive and precise, paused near a faint trace of evidence, a smudge on the carpet. It pawed lightly, sniffed carefully, then retreated briefly, as if signaling the significance of the discovery. The child's hand guided its focus, her gestures subtle but effective. The mother whispered softly, ensuring the toddler remained calm, yet the girl's focus was unwavering. Every eye in the room followed the interaction with rapt attention. The K9's behavior validated the child's observation, proving that her intuitive gestures were more than innocent play, they were a tool for discovery. Lawyers whispered urgently, strategizing on the implications of the newly revealed evidence. Prosecutors noted the potential impact on the case, while defense attorneys reconsidered their arguments. Witnesses provided clarification, confirming details that had been overlooked or dismissed. Reporters typed furiously, aware that the unfolding moment was historic in both its improbability and its significance. Spectators leaned forward, captivated, understanding that what they were witnessing, an intuitive toddler guiding a trained police dog, was a rare intersection of innocence, instinct, and procedural revelation. The K9 shifted its attention to another overlooked area, moving with deliberate precision. The child's tiny hand guided the dog subtly, pointing, adjusting, indicating areas of interest. Every movement was amplified by the courtroom's collective focus. Observers whispered, journalists clicked cameras, and jurors leaned forward, absorbed in the unfolding drama. Even the judge remained silent, recognizing that intervention was unnecessary. This was a natural discovery, orchestrated by instinct and intuition. The little girl giggled softly, a sound of delight and curiosity. The dog paused, sniffing the area she had indicated, ears pricked and tail raised. Each movement validated the child's gestures, creating a sequence of discovery that no human observer alone could have orchestrated. Every step, every subtle pawing, revealed minor yet crucial details, traces of evidence, overlooked clues, and small items that tied together disparate elements of the case. The courtroom, captivated and silent, followed every moment with rapt attention. By now, it was clear to everyone in the courtroom. The child's actions and the K9's response had revealed crucial investigative leads. Evidence previously dismissed or overlooked now held significance. The courtroom's tension was palpable, a charged atmosphere of anticipation and awe. Every adult present, lawyers, jurors, officers, and spectators, remained riveted as the K9, guided by the little girl's intuitive gestures, uncovered details long overlooked. Each subtle movement of the dog was magnified by the child's deliberate pointing, tilting of the head, or whispered guidance. The toddler's innocence had become the catalyst for a revelation no one had predicted, and every observer felt the weight of the unfolding moment. Officers documented the dog's movements meticulously, noting where it sniffed, pawed, and hesitated. Each pause, each slight shift, was a potential lead. The child's hand guided with a precision that seemed beyond her age, directing the K9 toward corners, folds in the carpet, and faint traces of scent that had evaded prior investigation. The courtroom, usually governed by the rhythm of legal procedure, had transformed into a dynamic investigative scene, alive with anticipation and possibility. The mother, holding her daughter gently, whispered reassurances, yet the toddler's focus was unbroken. Her wide eyes followed the dog's every step, a tiny hand guiding the massive animal as though it were an extension of her own perception. The K9, trained to respond instinctively to human cues, reacted with near-perfect precision, following subtle signals that no adult could interpret fully. Observers felt a strange mix of disbelief and awe. Here, in a formal courtroom, a 3-year-old and a police dog were rewriting the boundaries of expectation. Reporters captured every detail, documenting the scene for headlines that would later dominate the city's news cycle. Toddler guides K9 through trial evidence. One typed frantically. Courtroom miracle? Child and police dog reveal critical clues. Photographers zoomed in on the child's tiny finger, the K9's alert posture, and the captivated expressions of jurors and lawyers. Every movement became a story in itself, every pause a moment of suspense, and every sniff of the dog a revelation waiting to be understood. The dog's attention shifted to a faint stain on the floor, previously dismissed as irrelevant. It paused, sniffing carefully, tail stiff, ears pricked, and pawed gently at the mark. The toddler's finger followed, guiding the canine with subtle motions, and whispered softly, "Over here." Every eye in the room tracked the scene, understanding intuitively that the combination of the child's instinct and the dog's trained senses had uncovered something significant. The stain, once overlooked, now became a key element in reconstructing events. The judge, leaning forward, allowed the proceedings to continue cautiously. He recognized the extraordinary nature of the moment, but maintained composure to ensure the integrity of the trial. Attorneys exchanged hurried whispers, recalibrating strategies. Prosecutors noted the potential evidentiary value of the discovery, while defense attorneys weighed how it could impact their case. Witnesses were called to examine the area, corroborating details that had previously gone unnoticed. The courtroom, silent except for the dog's soft movements and the child's gentle guidance, seemed to hold its collective breath. Spectators leaned forward, murmuring softly, their excitement tempered by awe. "Can you believe this?" One whispered. A 3-year-old just guided a trained police dog to evidence no one else saw. Cameras continued to capture the interaction, each photograph immortalizing the delicate interplay of innocence and instinct. Journalists typed furiously, aware that the story they were witnessing would resonate far beyond the courthouse walls. Even the officers, accustomed to high-stress investigations, recognized the uniqueness of the moment. The canine moved with deliberate precision, sniffing along the baseboards and pausing at subtle markings on the carpet. A child's hand guided its movements, and the dog responded with instinctive accuracy. Every detail uncovered seemed to validate the toddler's gestures, creating a chain of observations that linked multiple aspects of the case. Lawyers leaned forward, taking careful notes. Jurors whispered to each other, captivated by the unfolding drama. Witnesses leaned closer, marveling at how a small child and a trained animal could illuminate hidden truths. The mother whispered, softly, concerned but also proud, "You're doing great, sweetie." The child, focused entirely on the dog, barely acknowledged her words. To the toddler, this was play. To the courtroom, it was revelation. The canine, guided by cues that seemed almost intuitive, uncovered small yet significant clues, a faint piece of fabric, a subtle indentation on the floor, and the faint aroma of a scent trail. Every discovery provided insight, reconstructing a narrative that had eluded investigators for weeks. The attorneys, both prosecution and defense, recognized the unprecedented nature of the moment. Evidence previously dismissed as irrelevant now held significance. Witnesses were asked to clarify observations, confirm details, and recount prior statements in light of the new discoveries. Reporters typed rapidly, capturing quotes, documenting reactions, and noting the child's role in the process. Social media buzzed even before the trial adjourned, the story spreading as a miraculous event. A toddler and a police dog influencing the course of a high-profile case. The canine paused, sniffing near the corner of the courtroom where an overlooked piece of paper had fallen. Its nose twitched, tail stiffened, and ears pricked as the child gently pointed. Whispering softly, she guided the dog closer. Observers watched in awe as the canine's paw lightly pressed the paper toward the center of the room. Jurors leaned forward, recognizing the potential significance of a document that had been ignored for weeks. Lawyers took hurried notes, adjusting their arguments to accommodate the new lead. The courtroom had shifted into a delicate rhythm, a dance of observation, instinct, and revelation. Every participant, judge, jury, lawyers, officers, reporters, and spectators was captivated by the unfolding sequence. The child's simple gestures, paired with the dog's trained responses, had become a powerful investigative tool, revealing details previously overlooked. Each movement was deliberate, precise, and purposeful, creating a narrative that extended beyond what the adults had anticipated. Witnesses were called to examine the newly discovered clues. Each testified to details that corroborated the chain of observations revealed by the child and the dog. Pieces of evidence, minor but crucial, began forming a coherent sequence. Lawyers whispered hurriedly, integrating the new information into their arguments. The judge maintained order, ensuring the proceedings continued smoothly despite the extraordinary circumstances. Spectators leaned forward, unable to hide their fascination with the unprecedented collaboration between innocence and trained instinct. Mother, observing quietly, felt a mixture of pride and awe. Her daughter, unaware of the monumental impact she had become the center of an investigative breakthrough. The K9 handler, equally amazed, recognized the precision and intuition in the interaction. Every subtle gesture of the child guided the dog, and every response of the dog confirmed the validity of her observations. The courtroom was collectively witnessing an event that defied explanation. A 3-year-old, leading a trained K9 to uncover overlooked evidence. Reporters continued to capture every nuance, knowing that their coverage would be historical. The child's gestures, the dog's reactions, the observers all were part of a narrative that transcended the ordinary. Cameras focused on the tiny hand guiding the K9, the dog's attentive movements, and the expressions of the adults around them. Every frame told a story of innocence, instinct, and revelation, a combination that had never been witnessed in a courtroom before. The K9's attention shifted again, following the subtle direction of the child. It sniffed, pawed, and tilted, its head toward faint markings on the floor. The toddler's gestures were deliberate, gentle, and precise. The mother whispered softly, careful not to interfere, while the dog followed each cue instinctively. Lawyers adjusted their arguments in response to the new discoveries. Jurors leaned forward in fascination, and reporters documented every moment. The courtroom had become a stage for a unique collaboration where innocence and training unveiled truths hidden from the most experienced adults. As the day wore on, the chain of discoveries grew. The child and the dog uncovered small but significant evidence scraps of material, subtle scent trails, and minor physical traces. Each clue, previously dismissed, was now validated by the attentive K9. Witnesses confirmed the relevance of the findings, and attorneys integrated the new evidence into their cases. Spectators, captivated and silent, understood that they were witnessing a rare event, a toddler's intuition guiding a trained K9 to reveal critical insights in a major trial. The judge called a brief recess, allowing observers to process the extraordinary sequence of events. Lawyers consulted quietly, officers documented findings, and reporters prepared to report on a moment that would become historic. The child, unaware of her influence, rested briefly in her mother's lap, while the K9 remained alert, ready to resume guidance at a subtle cue. The courtroom, suspended in awe and anticipation, had witnessed something extraordinary, the unveiling of hidden truths through the collaboration of innocence, instinct, and trained skill. By the end of the day, the trial had been irrevocably transformed. Evidence previously overlooked was now central to the proceedings. The little girl's simple gestures, combined with the K9's trained responses, had the courtroom hummed with a unique energy, a mixture of anticipation, disbelief, and awe. Every person present, jurors, lawyers, officers, reporters, and spectators, watched with rapt attention as the K9, guided by the toddler's tiny hand, continued uncovering evidence. Each subtle movement of the dog, every slight tilt of its head or paw, seemed to validate the child's intuitive gestures. What had begun as an unexpected moment of curiosity had now evolved into a defining turning point in the trial. The judge, maintaining a delicate balance between procedure and wonder, allowed the canine to continue its work. He understood that interfering could disrupt the flow of discovery, potentially diminishing the impact of the evidence being revealed. Lawyers, initially hesitant, now leaned forward, papers shuffled and notes taken furiously. Prosecutors whispered urgently among themselves, recognizing the potential for breakthrough testimony. Defense attorneys, equally focused, recalibrated their arguments, aware that new insights could challenge or bolster key claims. The courtroom had shifted into a tense theater of observation and revelation. The little girl, perched securely on her mother's lap, pointed once more with steady precision. Her finger directed the canine toward a faint indentation along the carpet, near where the victim had reportedly been. The dog paused, sniffing carefully, tail stiff, ears alert, then pawed lightly at the spot. Every movement was deliberate, guided by instinct and the child's subtle cues. Witnesses leaned forward, observing the discovery, their expressions a mix of fascination and astonishment. Even the seasoned detectives present could not deny the significance. What the child had indicated directly correlated with previously unverified testimony. Reporters clicked cameras and typed furiously, struggling to capture the gravity of the scene. Headlines were already forming in their minds. 3-year-old leads police dog to crucial evidence. Toddler alters trial with 2 words and a gesture. Courtroom miracle. Child's intuition unveils hidden truth. Social media would soon erupt, but at that moment, the courtroom itself was the epicenter of a story that defied conventional expectation. Spectators whispered softly, exchanging incredulous glances, while jurors' expressions betrayed both curiosity and a growing sense of awe. The mother whispered gently, trying to reassure her daughter, though the child's focus remained absolute. "Good job, honey," she murmured, stroking the toddler's hair. The child, oblivious to the enormity of her actions, continued guiding the dog with subtle gestures. The canine responded with instinctive precision, sniffing, pawing, and adjusting its position with each cue. Observers felt a profound mix of emotions, wonder, amazement, and anticipation, as evidence long overlooked began to emerge in plain sight. The prosecution seized the moment, redirecting witnesses to examine areas the canine had indicated. Each discovery, however minor, was meticulously documented and presented. Scraps of clothing, faint scent trails, subtle indentations in the flooring, all were examined, photographed, and logged. The court's rhythm had changed. What had been a formal legal proceeding was now intertwined with a living investigation, unfolding in real time under the guidance of a child and a canine. Attorneys whispered furiously to colleagues, adjusting arguments and anticipating objections, all while maintaining respect for the extraordinary circumstance. Jurors leaned forward in their seats, unable to look away. They had been trained to observe evidence critically, yet here, a 3-year-old had unintentionally guided the investigation to revelations adults had missed. Their whispers grew quieter, replaced by focused attention as the dog continued its careful search. Observers noted the precision in every movement, a tilt of the head, a gentle pawing motion, a slight sniff, each corresponding to areas the child indicated. The synergy between innocence and trained instinct was undeniable, and the courtroom seemed to collectively hold its breath, aware that a critical moment was unfolding. The dog's nose twitched as it approached a faintly scuffed area near the witness stand. The child, guided by instinct and curiosity, pointed with a determined expression. The dog's tail stiffened, ears pricked, and it pawed carefully at the spot. Observers whispered in awe. This subtle interaction was now providing corroborative evidence that could solidify key points of the case. Lawyers adjusted rapidly, integrating the new findings into ongoing arguments. Witnesses were called to verify, confirming minor details that had been previously overlooked, yet now gained significance. Reporters scribbled rapidly, documenting every action, every gesture. Photographers zoomed in on the child's finger, the dog's posture, and the expressions of adults around them. Toddler directs police dog to overlooked evidence, one typed frantically. Child's intuition guides investigation, typed another. Social media feeds would later fill with video clips and images. Yet no photograph could fully capture the depth of what had occurred, the convergence of innocence, instinct, and procedural precision in a single, extraordinary moment. The judge, maintaining order, allowed witnesses to continue providing testimony. Their observations were now colored by the evidence the canine had uncovered. Each minor detail, the scuff mark, a faint scent, the discarded glove was now framed in context, revealing a coherent sequence of events previously obscured. Jurors, quietly captivated, began to integrate these insights into their understanding of the case. Spectators whispered, some expressing disbelief, others moved by the extraordinary turn of events. The child's guidance led the canine to a small, folded piece of paper partially hidden near the courtroom's rear. The dog sniffed carefully, tail raised, and pawed gently at the paper, nudging it forward. The toddler's finger followed the movement, guiding the dog precisely. The court collectively gasped as the paper was retrieved, revealing a previously unexamined note that could be pivotal in understanding the case. Attorneys quickly examined the document, realizing it corroborated both testimony and the chain of evidence illuminated by the canine's search. Witnesses were called to validate the discovery. Each confirmed minor details, linking the newfound evidence to previously presented facts. Lawyers whispered rapidly, adapting their arguments to incorporate the new insights. The prosecution's narrative gained clarity, while the defense reevaluated strategy, aware that the unexpected discoveries had shifted focus. Jurors leaned forward, captivated, their expressions a mix of surprise and engagement. Reporters typed furiously, documenting every nuance for historical records. Cameras captured the interaction of the child, the canine, and the attentive courtroom, preserving a moment that would be replayed for years. The mother's pride was evident, tempered by a mixture of awe and concern. She whispered softly, "You're amazing," as the child continued guiding the canine with quiet confidence. The toddler, oblivious to the magnitude of her actions, remained intent on the dog's behavior, ensuring each movement corresponded to her subtle guidance. The canine, trained for years yet responding instinctively to the child, moved with careful precision. Every paw step, sniff, and tilt of the head reinforced the significance of the child's guidance. Spectators exchanged quiet murmurs, realizing they were witnessing something rare, a 3-year-old directly influencing the investigation of a high-profile case. The courtroom's rhythm had shifted. Legal procedure now intertwined with a living demonstration of discovery and intuition. Each movement of the dog, every gesture of the child, carried meaning, uncovering clues that reshaped understanding. The synergy of innocence and expertise had revealed critical insights, transforming the trial from routine to extraordinary. The dog paused, sniffing an area near the front of the courtroom, where a faint scent indicated prior movement. The child's small finger guided the canine toward the spot, whispering softly. Observers leaned forward, jurors' eyes wide with intrigue, attorneys adjusting strategies, and reporters capturing every detail. The evidence uncovered, previously overlooked, began to form a cohesive pattern, reinforcing witness statements and strengthening the prosecution's case. Every subtle interaction heightened the sense of suspense, as if the courtroom itself were holding its collective breath. Witnesses confirmed details of movement, object placement, and interactions previously missed. Each revelation, no matter how minor, was validated through careful observation and the guidance of the child-canine partnership. Lawyers, adapting in real time, integrated the findings into arguments and cross-examinations. Jurors listened intently, absorbing new information that clarified events. Spectators whispered in awe, moved by the improbable collaboration of innocence and instinct. Reporters continued documenting, knowing that the story would inspire awe. Far beyond the courthouse walls, as the afternoon wore on, the courtroom felt alive with anticipation. The child's gestures remained precise, the dog's responses instinctive. Evidence previously dismissed now illuminated key points in the case. Witnesses, attorneys, and jurors alike were forced to reconsider assumptions. The courtroom had shifted from procedural formality to a dynamic investigative theater. Observers understood that the extraordinary sequence of events, the child's intuition guiding a trained police dog, had unveiled truths that would shape the trial's outcome. The courtroom had changed completely from the start of the trial. What had begun as a standard legal proceeding had evolved into an extraordinary unfolding of insight, intuition, and revelation. The little girl, perched on her mother's lap, had guided the canine with subtle gestures, uncovering evidence previously overlooked. Every observer, from jurors to attorneys, reporters to spectators, felt the weight of the moment. The trial's momentum had shifted, and all eyes now turned to the final proceedings. The canine, still alert, followed every cue with instinctive precision. Its tail swished lightly, ears pricked, nose scanning the room. The child's finger guided, nodded, or tilted with delicate movements, prompting the dog to pause at spots that revealed critical insights. Officers documented every interaction meticulously, ensuring the discoveries were recorded accurately. Witnesses reconfirmed details, and attorneys referenced the newly uncovered evidence in their closing arguments. The courtroom's energy was a mixture of awe, anticipation, and solemn focus, all recognizing the unprecedented role a toddler and a police dog had played in shaping justice. The judge called the court to order, his voice steady but tinged with awe. "We have witnessed today an extraordinary event," he said, glancing at the child and the dog. "The combination of human observation and trained instinct has illuminated evidence in ways no one anticipated. We will now proceed with closing arguments." Lawyers shifted, whispering final notes, while the jurors leaned forward, their attention unwavering. Spectators held their breath, aware that the trial's outcome hinged not just on traditional evidence, but on a miraculous collaboration they had just witnessed. The prosecution summarized the evidence uncovered by the canine and the child. "Your Honor, members of the jury," the lead attorney said, voice steady but impassioned. "Today we have seen a unique partnership reveal crucial details. The dog, guided by the child, located items, scents, and subtle traces that corroborate witness testimony and previously undiscovered facts. This evidence is not only valid, it is pivotal. It confirms critical aspects of the case and cannot be dismissed as coincidence." The courtroom remained silent, every listener captivated by the clarity and significance of the argument. The defense, though initially skeptical, acknowledged the discoveries. While unconventional, the evidence uncovered through this extraordinary interaction cannot be ignored, the attorney said. "We urge the jury to weigh the corroborated findings with care. The child and the canine have illuminated details that must be considered in assessing the entirety of this case. Their contributions, though unexpected, provide clarity and insight that will assist the jury in reaching a fair and informed verdict." Murmurs rippled softly among spectators, reflecting their amazement at the unusual turn of events. The jurors, attentive throughout, now faced the task of synthesizing weeks of testimony, documents, and the unprecedented evidence revealed by a toddler's guidance of a police dog. Their deliberation would be careful, deliberate, and thorough. The canine, relaxed but alert, remained near its handler, glancing occasionally at the child who had led it to discoveries no adult had uncovered. The courtroom atmosphere was tense yet hopeful, charged with the realization that justice had been illuminated through an unlikely yet undeniably powerful collaboration. Observers whispered quietly, marveling at the improbability of what had occurred. Cameras clicked, capturing images of the child's tiny finger, the canine's attentive posture, and the expressions of awe on the faces of jurors, attorneys, and spectators alike. The mother watched silently, pride and emotion evident in her eyes. She understood that her daughter had participated in something extraordinary, an event that transcended the ordinary procedures of the courtroom and left a lasting impression on everyone present. The jury retired to deliberate, carrying with them the testimony, documents, and the unprecedented observations from the day. Hours later, they returned, faces solemn yet resolute. The judge called the court to order. "Have you reached a verdict?" he asked. The foreperson stood, voice steady. "We have, Your Honor." A hush fell over the courtroom, the anticipation almost tangible. Spectators leaned forward, reporters held cameras ready, and even the canine seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. The verdict was read aloud. "We, the jury, find the defendant." The pause was deliberate, each word weighted with consequence. "Guilty as charged." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Some spectators wept quietly, overwhelmed by the resolution, while others exchanged astonished glances. The judge nodded solemnly, acknowledging both the weight of the decision and the extraordinary circumstances surrounding the evidence that had informed it. Justice, in its most improbable form, had been achieved. The little girl clapped her hands softly, a sound of innocent delight. She did not fully understand the significance of the verdict, but she sensed the relief and calm that now permeated the room. The canine wagged its tail, ears relaxed, as though sharing in the quiet celebration. Officers and attorneys exchanged nods of respect, acknowledging the remarkable contribution made by the child and the dog. The courtroom, once tense and procedural, had transformed into a space of emotional resonance, connection, and awe. Reporters and photographers quickly captured the closing moments. Cameras focused on the child, the canine, and the expressions of jurors and spectators alike. Articles would later describe the courtroom as transformed by innocence, shaped by intuition, and forever changed by a toddler and a police dog. Social media buzzed with admiration and astonishment. Videos and images going viral within hours. The story spread beyond the courtroom, inspiring countless people with the improbable yet undeniable collaboration of a child's intuition and a trained K-9's instincts. The mother embraced her daughter gently, tears brimming in her eyes. "You helped today, sweetie," she whispered. The toddler smiled, oblivious to the full extent of her impact, but happy for the positive attention and the dog's company. The handler knelt beside the child, giving a quiet nod of acknowledgement. "You did amazing," he said softly, understanding that the bond formed between the child and the canine had achieved something extraordinary. Their teamwork had bridged innocence and skill, revealing insights no human alone could have uncovered. The judge addressed the courtroom one final time. "Today we have witnessed something extraordinary. The collaboration between a child and a police dog has revealed evidence and insights that were pivotal in reaching a just verdict. While unconventional, this moment will be remembered as a testament to observation, instinct, and the unexpected ways truth can be illuminated." Murmurs of agreement echoed softly. Spectators, officers, and attorneys alike felt a profound sense of awe. Recognizing the rarity and significance of what had transpired, as people began to exit the courtroom, many paused to take one last look at the child and the canine, their expressions a mixture of reverence, amazement, and admiration. The story had transcended the legal realm, becoming a symbol of hope, collaboration, and the extraordinary power of observation. Everyone present understood that they had been part of something historic, a moment where innocence and skill had converged to uncover truth. The little girl, still curious and energetic, waved at the canine, who wagged its tail in return. The bond they had formed was undeniable, a connection built on mutual trust, instinct, and subtle guidance. Officers praised the child quietly, understanding that her intuitive gestures had been central to the evidence uncovered. Lawyers and jurors discussed the case, noting how a 3-year-old's observations had altered the trajectory of the trial. The courtroom had witnessed not just a verdict, but a story of unexpected collaboration that would be remembered for years. News crews recorded the final moments, capturing the expressions of relief, awe, and admiration. Reporters summarized the day's events, emphasizing the role of the toddler and the canine in revealing critical evidence. Social media amplified the story, videos of the child and dog going viral, inspiring awe and curiosity worldwide. The trial, now concluded, had become more than a legal proceeding. It was a narrative of hope, intuition, and the remarkable potential found in unlikely partnerships. The child's mother, proud yet humbled, whispered softly, "You've done something incredible today." The toddler giggled, pointing once more at the canine, who responded with a playful tilt of its head. The handler smiled, kneeling beside the girl. "You two make an amazing team," he said. Observers understood that the moment had transcended the courtroom, leaving an indelible mark on everyone present. The verdict had been delivered, justice had been served, and a story of extraordinary collaboration had been etched into history. As the courtroom emptied, the judge lingered briefly, reflecting on the day's events. "This will be remembered," he murmured, mostly to himself. Rarely does innocence illuminate truth so clearly. Attorneys, jurors, officers, and spectators left quietly, each carrying their own sense of awe and admiration. The child's gestures, the canine's instincts, and the extraordinary events that had unfolded together created a lasting legacy, proof that truth can emerge in the most unexpected ways. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered for interviews. Cameras rolling, microphones extended. "It's not every day a 3-year-old helps solve a case in real time," one reporter said. "The bond between this child and the police